The rain was coming down in sheets when I slammed the car door shut. I could barely see past the windshield, but I didn't care. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, my phone buzzing nonstop in my lap. I didn't answer it. I didn't even look, because I already knew who it was, and what he was about to say wouldn't change a damn thing. My name is Delaney Harper, and I was on my way to my fiancé's mansion, but not for the reason you'd expect. I was going there to end it. But instead, I found someone else in his driveway. Someone I didn't know. Someone who would unravel my entire world. Let me back up. 2 weeks ago, everything was perfect, or at least, I thought it was. I lived in a small studio in the city, worked long hours at a boutique hotel, and spent every free minute talking about our wedding. My fiancé, Jasper, came from old money. His family had that kind of generational wealth that dripped from their voices and sat heavy in their judgment. They didn't like me. They never said it outright, but you could feel it. I was the nice girl from nowhere, the one who wore Target blouses to dinner parties and didn't know what flights to Lake Como even meant. Jasper told me it didn't matter. He kissed my forehead and said, "Let them talk. I'm marrying you, not them." And like a fool, I believed him. Until 2 nights ago, when I got a message from someone I didn't recognize. Unknown number. One photo. One line. "You should know where your fiancé really is tonight." The photo was blurry, but it was him. Jasper. On a rooftop bar in Midtown. Holding a woman's waist in a way I'd never seen him touch me. She was stunning. Red lips, black dress, laughing like she owned the world. And him? He looked free, like I'd never existed. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just waited. Waited to see if he'd lie. He didn't mention the dinner. He didn't call that night. And when I asked where he'd been, he said, "Work dinner. Boring. Can we talk about cake tastings instead?" I stared at him like he was a stranger. That's when I decided I needed answers. And I wouldn't get them over text. I took the next day off, packed an overnight bag, and drove straight to his family's estate. That brings us back to the rain. I pulled into the long driveway of the Callaway mansion, tires skidding slightly on the soaked cobblestone. The place looked like something out of a magazine: stone walls, iron gates, a fountain that probably cost more than my entire college education. I was rehearsing what I'd say when I saw her. She was standing near the front steps, soaked to the skin, hugging herself like her bones were cold. Not the woman from the photo. This girl was younger, barefoot, trembling. Her face was blotchy from crying, and one arm was scraped like she'd fallen. Instinct took over. I threw the car in park, grabbed an umbrella, and ran toward her. Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my voice almost drowned in the storm. She flinched, didn't speak, just looked at me like she couldn't believe I was real. I noticed something then. Her wrists. Red. Raw. Like someone had been holding her too tight. "I'm Delaney," I said softly, stepping closer. "You don't have to be afraid." She hesitated, then whispered, "I wasn't supposed to leave the house." Her voice was small, broken, like a secret cracking through her lips. That's when the front door burst open, and Jasper appeared. He looked furious, but not at me, at her. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he barked. "Get inside." I stepped between them without thinking. "She's bleeding," I said. "She needs help, and she's scared." Jasper's eyes flicked to me, cold, calculating. A beat passed. Then he smiled, that fake politician smile. "Babe," he said, his voice syrupy. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it," I said. "Who is she?" He didn't answer. The girl looked like she might collapse. "Get in the car," I told her gently. "You don't have to go inside." She didn't move, just stood there, shaking. That's when Jasper reached for her arm. And I saw it, the terror in her eyes. That's also when I snapped. "Touch her again," I said, low and dangerous. "And I swear I'll call the cops." Jasper froze, then laughed. "You don't know what you're talking about. Try me." We stared at each other, the kind of silence that hums like a live wire. I opened my car door. "You coming?" I asked the girl. This time, she nodded. She got in. And I drove. Fast. Far. Away from that cursed house. Neither of us said a word for miles. Until finally, I whispered, "What did they do to you?" Her answer. It changed everything. The air around the mansion was unnaturally quiet, like the calm before a storm. I stood there, fists still clenched, heart hammering from the confrontation I just walked into. The woman I had protected, thin, trembling, and so far from the world of crystal chandeliers and gated drives, gripped her torn jacket like it was armor. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She nodded once, then shook her head. Her lips trembled. I didn't know where else to go. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant when a familiar voice sliced through the tension like a blade. "Camille?" I turned. There he was. Griffin. Tall. Perfectly dressed in his slate gray jacket, no tie, always too casual for someone who'd grown up in rooms with ceilings hand-painted by Italians. His eyes flicked between me and the woman, his brow furrowing like he was doing math in his head. "What the hell is going on?" he said. I was still standing between them. "She was being thrown out. By your staff. Like trash." He took a step closer, eyes on her now. But not kind. Not warm. Not even surprised. "Delilah," he said to the woman, "you can't keep showing up like this." The way he said her name. Like it was a nuisance. The woman, Delilah, flinched. I blinked. You know her?" Griffin ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I do. She's my cousin." His voice was tight, controlled. But Delilah stepped forward now, fire flashing briefly behind her exhaustion. "You mean was, Griffin. Until your family decided addicts were an embarrassment." That word landed like a thunderclap. Addict. And now I saw it. The way her eyes darted. The tremble in her fingers. But also the pain, raw, human, ugly and beautiful in its honesty. Griffin turned to me. "Camille, you don't understand. She's been in and out of rehab for years. She's stolen from us. Lied. She shows up when she wants something." "I just needed a place to sleep," Delilah whispered. "I told you," he snapped. "No more." I looked at him. This man I was supposed to marry. The one who'd sworn to love me at my worst. But here he was, cutting off his own blood because it was inconvenient. "You didn't even let her speak," I said quietly. He shook his head. "You don't know the damage she's done." "I know the damage you're doing now," I said. "Throwing someone away when they're already broken? That's not strength, that's cruelty." Delilah turned then. "I'm sorry," she said to me. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." She walked past us, head bowed, and I watched Griffin's jaw tighten. But he didn't stop her. Neither did I. But I followed. "Wait," I called after her, jogging down the long front path until I caught up. "You don't have anywhere to go?" She hesitated. "There's a shelter downtown, but they won't have beds till tomorrow." My coat was too thin for the night. Hers was worse. I didn't think. I just said it. "Come with me." She blinked. "What?" "I have a place. It's small, but you can stay." Her eyes filled instantly. "Why would you do that?" I shrugged, but my voice cracked. "Because you needed someone." And I've been there. It was true. Griffin didn't know this part of me. Most didn't. I spent a year couch hopping after my dad walked out and my mom spiraled. It had taken everything in me to crawl out of that hole. So I saw it in her. That hunger, that loneliness, that flicker of hope that someone, anyone, might see you as worth saving. So we left the mansion behind. We walked to my car, silent. The stars overhead were diamond bright, but my hands were shaking. Once inside, I glanced at her. "Do you want food?" She nodded, almost shyly. "Anything." We drove in silence to a late-night diner. I got us pancakes. She devoured hers like they might disappear. "I'm sorry," she said between bites, "for crashing your night." I gave a small smile. "Honestly, you might have saved it." Her eyes softened. "Griffin, he's good at hiding what he doesn't want you to see." I sipped my coffee. "Tell me." She looked down. "I was 16 when my dad died. Griffin's dad, my uncle, took everything. said I was too unstable, cut me off. Griffin didn't fight him, just watched. That lined up. Griffin was always careful, always loyal to his father, no matter how controlling the man was. I thought maybe. She laughed bitterly. Maybe if I showed up clean, they'd see I was trying. But it doesn't matter. I'll always be the stain they pretend isn't family. My throat tightened. You're not a stain, I said. You're a survivor. And for a second, her eyes shone. We finished eating, and I took her home, my tiny studio in the city. I laid out blankets, made tea. We didn't talk much more. But when I saw her curled up safely, breathing deep, I felt something shift in me. Like I had just walked out of a world I didn't belong in, and into the one I was meant for. That night, I lay awake. I kept seeing Griffin's face, his calm, detached cruelty, the way he had looked at her like an inconvenience. And I kept hearing her voice. Griffin's good at hiding what he doesn't want you to see. The next morning, everything changed. Because as I was brushing my teeth, I got a text from an unknown number. Check your fiancé's past before you say, I do. Start with Delilah. Then look in the guest house. I froze. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I woke to the sound of rain tapping softly against the mansion's tall windows. For a second, I forgot where I was. The velvet chair under me, the faint smell of citrus and wood polish, none of it felt like mine. Until I sat up and saw Lena, curled up on the opposite couch, using her jacket as a blanket. She stirred and looked at me groggily. You stayed, she whispered. Something about her voice made my throat tighten. Of course I did. She looked like she hadn't heard those words in years. I stood slowly, joints stiff from the awkward sleeping position. The mansion was still quiet. No sounds from upstairs. No staff. No fiance. No Jay. I checked my phone. Still no texts. Still no missed calls. I didn't know what was worse, that he hadn't reached out, or that part of me wasn't even surprised. I'll make us some tea, I offered, trying to give both of us something normal to hold onto. The kitchen was industrial-level massive. Chrome fixtures, marble countertops, a dozen knives I didn't know how to use. Jay always said it was for show. He never cooked a thing in his life. As I waited for the kettle to boil, Lena walked in slowly, hugging herself. You don't have to stay, she said quietly, her voice cracking. People usually leave once they've decided I'm not worth saving. I turned to her and said the first thing that came to me. People suck, she blinked, and then gave a broken little laugh. Yeah, they do. We sat at the island, sipping lavender tea in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, it just was. Like two strangers who knew the other had seen too much to need small talk. I finally asked, how do you know Jay? She hesitated, swirling her tea, then glanced up at me with a tired expression. I could ask you the same thing. I frowned. He's my fiancé. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't look surprised. I figured, she said. What does that mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked something else entirely. Do you know what he does when you're not here? A cold feeling crept over me. He works, I said too quickly. Lena just nodded slowly, as if that word, works, meant something completely different to her. I wanted to press her. I needed to, but my phone buzzed. Jay. Finally. Where are you? I was out all night working. I come home and you're gone. No note, no text. Call me. No apology. No explanation. No mention of Lena. He didn't even ask if I was safe. I stared at the screen, then quietly put the phone face down on the counter. Lena was watching me, expression unreadable. He lies easily, doesn't he? I didn't want to admit how true that felt. Instead, I said, tell me everything. She studied me for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the far end of the kitchen, and pulled a drawer open. She returned with a folder. Inside, documents, photos, printouts, hotel receipts, wire transfers, airline tickets under fake names, a photo of Jay, with a woman who wasn't me, and one that was. Lena. She handed it all to me without a word. Each page I flipped made my stomach twist tighter. My Jay wasn't just hiding things. He was orchestrating a life I wasn't part of. I looked up at her, trying to speak, but no words came. She said softly, "I thought I loved him too. I thought I was the only one. He told me he was divorced. He told me you were crazy, that you'd left." My heart cracked down the middle. All those nights he said he was working late. All the moments I told myself not to be needy, not to question. He was in this house with her, lying with the same mouth he used to kiss me. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, but instead, I laughed. A small, hollow, broken laugh. Because somehow, this betrayal didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like confirmation. Confirmation that I'd been lying to myself just as much as he'd been lying to me. "I should go," I said finally, standing up, gripping the folder like a shield. Lena nodded. But before I could leave, she reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. "You're not crazy," she said, "and you're not alone." Something about the way she said it, like she knew what it was to feel like both, made me stop at the door. I turned to her. "What are you going to do now?" She gave a weak smile. "Whatever you do, I'll follow." I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But I knew I wasn't walking out of this house the same woman who walked in. By the time I got to the mansion's tall iron gates, I was drenched in sweat, my coat clinging to my skin. The Uber had dropped me off at the bottom of the hill. I couldn't even afford the rest of the fare. I buzzed once, then twice. The camera above the gate clicked. I stared up into it like it was a judge, trying to figure out if I was guilty or just pathetic. After a long pause, the gates groaned open. I walked in, my boots leaving wet prints on the polished stone path. I hadn't been here in months, and yet, it still smelled like Tyler. Like cedarwood and cologne and expensive things I never felt fully allowed to touch. The front door was cracked open. And inside, voices. I hesitated, my knuckles hovering above the brass doorknob. And then I heard it. "She's not going to make a scene. She's too proud for that." It was Tyler's voice. My heart sank. A second voice, softer, feminine, almost laughing. "She doesn't even know the real you, babe. That's the problem." And that's when I walked in. The entrance hall was just as I remembered it, cavernous, echoing, cold. But my eyes went straight to the living room. There they were. Tyler, in a robe, standing too close to her. A woman with silky dark hair, barely dressed, sipping champagne out of my favorite glass. He froze when he saw me. The woman looked me up and down like I was dirt tracked in from the yard. "You came," Tyler said, like he was surprised. "I did," I said. My voice was flat, calm, but I could feel it breaking under the surface. "Who's this?" the woman asked, still smirking. "Her name's," Tyler started. "I'm his fiancé," I said sharply. The woman burst into laughter. "Oh my God, this is so awkward." I turned to Tyler. "Is this what you do when I'm not here?" Tyler had the audacity to roll his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Eliza. You weren't supposed to come back until Tuesday." "I got fired, Tyler. Fired. I needed you." He blinked, like he hadn't heard a single word. And then he said, "You should have told me first." I felt something inside me snap. "I did call, but you were too busy to answer. Probably with her." The woman giggled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "She's kinda intense, babe." He nodded, like I was just some clingy burden who'd overstayed her welcome. "So what?" I said quietly. "You were just waiting for me to disappear? While you moved on like none of it mattered?" He shrugged. "Eliza," he said, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're amazing. You really are. But this us hasn't felt right for a while. And you couldn't say that before I gave up everything for you?" "I didn't ask you to give up your job," he snapped. "No, you just made me feel like I had to." He looked away. And for the first time, I saw it. He wasn't sorry. Not really. He was relieved. I took one long breath. I didn't cry. Not yet. But my knees were shaking. "I gave you my trust," I said. "My loyalty. And all you gave me back was this." The woman reached for a strawberry from a bowl on the counter. "You're being super dramatic right now." I turned to her. Who are you? His real future, she purred. And that did it. I turned and walked out the front door. Didn't slam it. Didn't scream. Just walked. But when I reached the end of the driveway, I realized I had nowhere to go. No apartment. No job. No ring on my finger. No man behind me begging me to stay. Only me. And then, headlights. A car pulled up to the gates slowly. Black SUV, tinted windows. It stopped. The back window rolled down. And there she was. The girl from the street. The one I defended that morning. Her face was cleaned up now, hair brushed, wearing a simple cardigan over a linen dress. She blinked at me in surprise. It's you. Hi, I said, stunned. What are you doing here? The driver got out and opened the door for her. She stepped out slowly. I live here, she said softly. Well, I used to. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. You. What? She smiled, sad and knowing. Come on, you need some tea. I didn't remember getting in the car. 1 minute, I was standing outside Owen's mansion, my dress torn, my breath ragged, my heart scraped raw. The next, I was gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, headlights blurring the rain on the windshield as I drove aimlessly through winding roads I barely knew. I couldn't go home. Not back to that apartment that held every echo of him. His laugh in the kitchen. His cologne on my pillow. His lies in every corner. The GPS kept chirping in the background, routes, directions, meaningless suggestions. I turned it off. I drove for hours, past the city lights, past the suburbs, into the quiet hum of countryside where no one knew my name. I ended up at a 24-hour diner somewhere off Route 8. My hands were shaking too hard to hold a coffee cup. The waitress was kind enough not to ask questions. She just kept refilling it. I watched the steam rise and thought about everything I'd lost. Not just Owen, but the version of myself I was willing to silence for him. The version who swallowed doubts with a smile, who apologized for asking questions, who accepted "you're too sensitive" like it was a diagnosis. I let myself feel everything I buried. And then I cried. Right there in a cracked vinyl booth. At 3:17 a.m. over a cup of lukewarm coffee. The next morning, I drove to the only place that ever felt safe. My Aunt Claire's cabin in upstate New York. She hadn't lived there in years, but she kept the keys under a rusted flower pot, same as always. The place smelled like cedar and dust. I aired it out, lit a fire, slept on the couch for 2 days. No phone, no emails, no Owen, just silence. And slowly, me. It was on the third day I saw her again. The girl from the mansion. Except she wasn't bruised anymore. She was standing on the porch, holding a duffel bag and a plastic grocery sack like her whole life fit into them. I opened the door, startled. She smiled nervously and said, "I heard this was yours. How did you?" I found a letter in Owen's study. It had this address. I figured, if you weren't here, it wouldn't matter. But if you were, her voice cracked. I stepped aside, let her in. She introduced herself properly this time. Sophie, just Sophie. No last name, no preamble. But her eyes were wide and kind and sad in the same way mine were. We didn't talk about what happened at first. We just existed together. Two women recovering from the same storm, under the same roof. She cooked. I cleaned. We drank too much wine one night and ended up crying on the floor, laughing at how messed up everything had been. But it wasn't until the fourth night that Sophie finally told me her story. She'd met Owen 2 years ago, at a charity gala. She was working as a server. He was charming, generous, magnetic, and persistent. He swept her up like a whirlwind, bought her gifts, promised her freedom from the life she was trying to escape. But slowly, that freedom twisted into something else. He didn't want her to work. Then he didn't want her to leave the house. Then he didn't want her to speak to her family. He said I was his project, she whispered. That no one would want me if he didn't. My stomach turned. That's what abusers do. They don't always yell. They isolate. They suffocate. And then they convince you that being broken is love. He told me about you, she added, eyes flickering to mine. Said you were compliant and convenient. But I watched you. The night you came to the mansion, my throat tightened. You stood up to him, for me. I didn't know people did that. I blinked back tears. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Not heavy silence. Not sad. Just understanding. Two women. Two stories. One monster we both left behind. I don't know what made me do it, but that night, I pulled out my laptop. I started writing. Not about Owen, but about the feeling of losing yourself in someone else's shadow, of clawing your way out, of rediscovering the sound of your own voice. I didn't stop for hours. And Sophie, she started painting again. At first, just small watercolors on scraps of paper. Then full canvases. Her trauma, her healing, it poured out in color and brushstrokes. We built something in that cabin. A soft kind of strength. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel alone. I felt real. The doors to the gallery were already open when we arrived. I stepped in, heart pounding, and immediately froze. There were photos everywhere, breathtaking portraits, all black and white, all striking. But they weren't just of strangers. Some were of me. Me handing the woman a blanket at the shelter. Me laughing with her daughter. Me wiping down a countertop. Tiny, unimportant moments, captured with reverence, love, respect. They weren't unflattering or pitiful. They made me look like someone who mattered. I've been documenting the people who changed my life, Riley said quietly. You gave me the courage to rebuild. This is my thank you. I blinked fast, trying not to cry again. But then, I saw him. Standing across the gallery, awkward in his too expensive suit, looking like he didn't belong in a place so full of truth. Chase. He spotted me instantly. Riley stiffened, her grip tightening slightly on my hand. Do you want to leave? No, I whispered. Not this time. He made his way over slowly, cautiously, like I was some kind of wild animal he was afraid would bite. You look different, he said. I smiled, not kindly. Because I am. He glanced around. This is all. Yours? Not mine, hers. But yes, I helped. That's what happens when you invest in something that matters. He shoved his hands in his pockets. Listen, Tessa, I made a mistake. I know that now. You were always loyal, always good to me. I got scared. You didn't get scared, I said calmly. You got greedy. You wanted someone who would play pretend with you, not someone who'd call out your cruelty. He flinched. People were watching now, but I didn't care. You abandoned me in front of people who cheered for my humiliation. And now you're standing here like that didn't happen. I panicked. No, you chose, I said. Just like I'm choosing now to walk away. For good. Riley was beside me, steady and warm. Her daughter peeked from around one of the gallery doors, waving shyly. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely whole. I turned back to Chase. Go back to your country club, or whatever echo chamber you live in. But don't come looking for me again. He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. I left him standing there, surrounded by photographs of real people, lives he'd never understand. The next few weeks were a blur of emotion. The gallery received rave reviews. People called Riley a visionary. She was offered a spot in a traveling exhibit, then a book deal. I helped her manage it all, still quietly working behind the scenes. We never made some big declaration. There was no candlelit confession or dramatic kiss in the rain. There was just presence. The kind that shows up every morning and says, "You're not alone." Her daughter started calling me T, short for Tessa. I loved it more than any title I'd ever held before. And slowly, quietly, the wounds from before began to close. Months later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from Chase's mother, a wedding invitation. He was marrying the woman he'd left me for. I held the envelope for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just smiled. Because I didn't feel jealous. I felt free. Let them have their glittering emptiness, their curated perfection, their fragile lies. I had something better, something real. On the night of the gallery's final showing, Riley handed me a small wrapped package. "Open it," she said, her eyes warm. Inside was a photograph. It was me, kneeling next to her daughter, both of us laughing. There was sun on my face. I looked alive. I looked happy. "I took that the morning after you told us we deserved better," she whispered. "It's what you gave us. I want you to remember what you look like when you're not being broken." I held the frame close to my chest. "Thank you for seeing me." She reached for my hand gently. "Thank you for saving me when I didn't even know I needed it." We stood there, two women who had once been strangers on the edge of disaster. Now we were survivors, friends, maybe even something more. Not because of grand gestures, but because we had fought, not just for each other, but for ourselves. And in that fight, we found something unshakable. Love, respect, home. Not in mansions, not in diamonds, not in last names or Instagram filters, but in quiet moments, in healing laughter, in truth. And that was the life I chose, not the one I ran to, but the one I built. One beautiful, unshakable piece at a time.